I was a congressional staffer on January 6th. I was in the basement of the Capitol building when it was being, quote, stormed by, quote, insurrectionists. And I knew at that time, while I was underneath them, because we were in this room below the Capitol building, they funneled us all in. They said, emergency, everybody funnel into this safe room, but it wasn't a safe room. And we're all there, all the congressional staffers, all the Congress people, and we can hear we heard what we thought were gunshots at the time, but really what it was tear gas being deployed above our head.
You're listening to Finally a Decent Podcast. I'm Bill Johnson and the president and the founder of American Decency Association. It's my pleasure to be able to introduce to you today Jacky Eubanks. So, Jacky Eubanks, you are the director of field operations for Michigan Fair Elections. Please tell us, what is Michigan Fair Elections and what is your role as a director for field operations?
So Michigan Fair Elections Institute is a 501c3 nonprofit focused on two pillars, which is educational outreach and election oversight. Underneath those panels are those two pillars. Educational outreach looks like going out and telling the public about key election issues, whether that's presenting at community events or meetings, or if it's writing letters to voters to inform them about different things, doing letter writing, phone calls, and helping low propensity and low education voters to understand the electoral process. With election oversight, we have a pretty robust souls to rolls voter roll cleanup program where we look through the data on the voter rolls to see if there's anything that might need removal from the voter rolls. That could include people who may be deceased, people who may have moved out of state, or if there's an unusually high number of registrations at a single family home address, we just want to make sure that those all check out, or if possible, it may be that people have moved and they just never removed their registration. So then we have door knockers go, bring affidavits. If residents are able to sign affidavits attesting that those people no longer live at that address, we then have a clerk advocate who takes those affidavits to the local clerk's office in that jurisdiction and asks the clerk to put them on a challenged list, at which point the clerk will send a postcard to that registrant asking them to come in and confirm that the voter information is correct within a 30-day window. If they do not do that, then usually it's the registration will be removed. And that's good because we need to maintain clean voter rolls in order to keep integrity in our elections. In Michigan, we have several 100,000 more voter registrations on the rolls than we do have people of voting age in the state. So that's a serious concern, and it's ripe for abuse. If you had even one person who had ill intent, who happened to be in the clerk's office or happened to know of registered voters who no longer reside in the state or reside at that address, they could use that registration to cast a fake vote, and we want to prevent that from happening.
You have already a big role in this organization, and you obviously, when I first started to hear you, when you came on the program, I thought, my goodness, you are articulate, you are young, you are passionate. Where did you catch the vision for this work? And then I understand that you've also, which I'll ask you about as well, you also have worked with Charlie Kirk's organization out of Ohio. But first, where did you get all the drive for, and what pulled you into this great concern?
So I think with election integrity specifically, I had been an elections office worker. That was my summer job when I was in college. I would work for my local township office in the elections department. I started in 2018. That was the year that we got the new tabulators that are now everywhere in the state. And I had to be the intern who wrote the manual on how to use the machines for the election poll workers for election day operations. So I had to pour through that manual, the technical manual, and then put it into layman's terms and make it readable for the elections worker who's just going to show up for election day. And I did have concerns at that time, actually, about their connectivity to the internet, because they were sold to the clerks as completely secure, not connected to the internet, no chance of hacking. But when I read the technical manual and understood how the machine worked, there was a button that said modem, which you push to wirelessly transmit the results on the tabulator to to the clerk's office website and the Secretary of State's website to get those official results out. So automatically I knew that that couldn't be true because modem implies wireless connectivity. And I later found out that there in fact are 4G LTE wireless chips in them, whether contracted by AT&T or Verizon. So the machines themselves, when you purchase them, it comes with a Verizon wireless or an AT&T package to allow for that wireless transmission of results. So they are connected to the internet, and that was a concern to me even back in 2018. But in 2020, that was my last summer being a clerk's office election worker. Things got even stranger because we know COVID happened, the lockdown happened. Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson used that as an opportunity to mail out absentee ballot applications to every registered voter in the state, which there already are more registrations than people. So inevitably, applications were going to go to people who did not live at that address and would be returned to sender. On the back end in the clerk's office, we would receive envelopes full of absentee ballot applications that all came from the same location. Okay, so they were all stuffed in the same envelope with the same return address, which was Secretary of State's office. But it looked like it was the same handwriting on all of them, and the signatures did not match the voter signatures on file for those voters. And I would lay them out in a row and I would point out to my coworkers, look, it looks like the same person filled these all out and the signatures don't match the originals on file. I do not feel comfortable issuing them ballots. And I was told that I was holding up the process and I was causing an unnecessary backup. And I was told, this is a direct quote, stop sleuthing, stop playing detective. We have a job to do. This is a massive job. We have more absentee ballot applications than we've ever received in the history of elections in this township. We can't have you stalling out the process. So they cut my hours from full time to 4 hours a week after I'd been there for 3 years with glowing letters of recommendation, at which point I realized I was being forced out for being the squeaky wheel. And I ended up working for the Trump campaign. I immediately got a job with the Trump campaign in 2020, working as a field organizer in Macomb County. Flash forward to election night and election the morning after, I had volunteers down at the TCF Center calling me crying, saying they're stealing the election right in front of our eyes. And when Biden was installed as president after January 6th, which I was a congressional staffer on January 6th. I was in the basement of the Capitol building when it was being, quote, stormed by, quote, insurrectionists. And I knew at that time, while I was underneath them, because we were in this room below the Capitol building, they funneled us all in. They said, emergency, everybody funnel into this safe room, but it wasn't a safe room. And we're all there, all the congressional staffers, all the Congress people, and we can hear we heard what we thought were gunshots at the time, but really what it was tear gas being deployed above our heads. And you could hear the thunderous like footsteps above our heads. And I thought to myself, these are not Trump people. These are not MAGA people. They're not here to attack anybody. They're not going to kill us. I felt at the time that was a setup in order to force Congress to approve the election results. Otherwise, it would legitimize whatever, quote, insurrection was going on above our heads. So it basically forced Congress's hand to let Biden be president. And that always rubbed me the wrong way. And it got me so angry and so fired up that I thought, I can't let this stand. This is a grave injustice. We have a man who should have been president, Donald J. Trump, and he's not in the White House because of fraud. So I went on my own to go investigate in the summer of 2021 and ended up discovering that there were many flaws in the voter rolls that may have led to false ballots being cast in the name of people who did not cast them.
That is incredible. I didn't realize what what a wealth of experience already you have had. So even as a young person, you had this indignation. I mean, you could have just been in that situation in those early years and just kind of moved along. Go, well, okay, I'll just abide with all this stuff. So what was there about you? I mean, was it Christian convictions, or what was it that drove you into having this strong sense of indignation already as a young person?
Well, I feel very blessed. I grew up in a traditional Catholic family, and I have always felt a hunger for justice. You know, Christ says in the Beatitudes, blessed are they who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be satisfied. And so when I see things like injustice, it really galvanizes me to right that wrong, because we are charged with building the kingdom of heaven on earth. And in order to have that kingdom, we have to have justice. And God is a God of justice. So I feel that we are called to participate in bringing about a more just world, but just through his eyes, meaning truth. And so the truth of the matter is, there was rife evidence that there was massive voter fraud in the 2020 election. It's just that our elected officials, who, and I'm not here to speak on their behalf, I don't know their hearts, but largely seem to be complacent in allowing the results that came out of the TCF Center to stand. And so, if you're somebody who values truth and justice, and you see these things with your own eyes and you know what you know, there's something that's going to just say, I have to act, because if I, when I die, I will be judged by my creator for the things I didn't do as much as the things I did do. And so you can be guilty of the sin of omission, not doing the thing that God called you to do when the time came. So far be it for me to not take up the mantle when the time is ripe to do so.
It's so powerful. And so you went to Hillsdale College. What did you major in?
So I majored in politics, but in politics, in the politics major, you have to pick a concentration. You can either choose political philosophy, American government, or international politics. I chose political philosophy. So I spent most of my Hillsdale time reading the great works like John Locke, Montesquieu, Nietzsche, Rousseau, Hegel, Machiavelli, Hobbes, Aristotle, Plato, basically everything you can think of that comes from the classic Western canon of philosophy I've read.
Wow. So, so how many years did it take for you to graduate from there?
Uh, 3.5. And I did summer classes every time. So all the summers I was taking summer classes to get through early. Just because it's easier to save money that way.
So at that stage of your life, what direction did you think you might be tilted in turning to?
Really hard about what God wanted me to do. And I put it before the Lord, and I talked with my mom, who's, she knows me. Your mom knows you better than anyone. And she said, well, the only things that you've ever really loved and been great at are writing and politics. And so if there was a way that you could put the two together, I think that would be probably the right way to go. And so while I was in college, I would spend time in reflection and prayer, asking the Lord where he wanted to lead me. And I always felt compelled towards activism specifically, which is rare, because when you're in politics and you're a young person, what usually happens is you decide to go the legislative staffer to law school or legislative staffer to think tank route, and you end up doing public policy, or you end up, working your way up to chief of staff. But office work never fulfilled me, and I did try it for a time, and it was not where my heart was. I loved being a staffer on the Trump campaign in 2020, and I loved working for Turning Point with the youth every day on campus. I'm much more inclined to do activism than office work. And I think activism ultimately is much more impactful, because you can really see the fruits of your labors on the ground in real time. And we can change the culture. We can push for change. We can push for truth and justice in a way that you can't really if you're just an office staffer. And of course, that's not to knock anybody who chooses that. It's a very safe and steady route usually. Because you're not tied to election cycles in the way that you would be with activism. But if you have a heart for service and you love people, you definitely want to go the activism route.
That is so exciting. And so how long were you with Turning Point then?
I was with them for 4 semesters. So I started in the fall of 2022 and ended towards the end of May in 2024. So that's actually usually the length of time that somebody would be contracted to work with them, is 2 years.
So when you were working when you came out of when you were at Hillsdale College and you graduated, what did you do next then?
So it was 2020. And so it was still the lockdowns. And of course, there were almost no jobs that I could have entered at that time, because nobody was hiring, because nobody was working. And so I was lucky immediately. So college ends in mid May, right? Like final exams end May 9th, May 10th. And so my graduation ceremony was postponed until the middle of July. It wasn't until July 18th. So from the end of college to my graduation ceremony, I I worked as a elections worker in my clerk's office, which was par for the course. I had done that 2 summers prior. So going back for the 2020 election, being a clerk's office election worker again was just the natural thing to do. Plus, they were hiring when nobody else was because it was an election year and I already had an in. They knew me, they knew I was a good hard worker. And then, like I said, I felt that I was being asked to send ballots to people who I had major concerns were not actually the people who were requesting them. And when they cut my hours, it just happened perfectly. I went to my graduation ceremony on July 18th and got a phone call at my graduation ceremony saying I'd been hired by the Trump campaign to be a field organizer in Macomb County. So immediately after my graduation ceremony, which was Saturday, I jumped to Lansing to go to training on that Monday and then kicked it off right away. So it was a whirlwind. It was probably the best campaign job I've ever had. It was unlike anything I've ever experienced because we felt like this is our do or die because you have to remember it was still lockdown season, okay? Mask mandates, they're rolling out the vaccines and we knew they were going to force them on us. We felt like we were under tyranny, BLM riots torching the country. And so it felt like everything was on the line and that they were going to usher in communism under the guise of safety and emergency powers. And so with that zeal, we had so much passion and we worked so hard. And then we won Macomb County for Trump with 53% of the vote. But it really was the TCF Center that killed it for me. It was I went to bed at like 3:34 in the morning, so confident Trump won because he was up by 350,000 votes in Michigan when I went to bed at 4 in the morning. 350,000 votes with 97% of the vote reporting. So if you do the math, 97% of the vote reporting, he's got 350,000. That meant that there were only going to be about 250,000 max ballots left to count. Well, guess what happened? When I woke up in the morning at 6:30 a.m. to check the totals and it said Biden was now winning Michigan, that means Biden got an influx of 400,000 plus ballots in a 2-hour time frame from 4 to 6 in the morning in Detroit. And it's just the magnitude is crazy because you have to realize 400,000 ballots in 2 hours, and they're all for Biden without exception. And that doesn't happen, first of all. But second of all, you've already exceeded the number of expected votes because even if that remaining 3% to be counted, even if every single one of them was for Biden, it only would have been 250,000. So Trump still would have won. So the math just didn't add up. So I knew, and I had volunteers calling me, telling me I am watching them run the same batch of ballots through the tabulator over and over and over. I am watching them put in fake names and fake birth dates into the qualified voter file and saying that that voter voted on this ballot. And I'm watching them. They're not unfolding ballots and absentee ballot folders because with absentee ballot folders, like you have to have them in an envelope, right? You have to unseal the envelope. The ballot gets unfolded and then run through the tabulator. I was told a truck pulled up, and there's video of this. A truck pulled up, unloaded boxes of ballots. None of them were folded. None of them had envelopes. They were all for Biden. That doesn't happen. That means somebody printed off ballots and ballots and ballots of just Biden and Biden and Biden and Biden. And that was the only thing that was filled out on all of those ballots.
That's incredible. Now, were you at is it the what is TCF Center? You were there?
I was not there. I had done my door knocking during the day, and after all of my door knocking throughout the day, ending at like 8 o'clock at night, because that's when polls close, I went home and I had volunteers who signed up to be poll challengers who were down at the TCF Center. I was not asked to be a poll challenger down there. So I just was watching the election results roll in, thinking, okay, we did a good job. We left it all on the track. I'm fairly confident going to bed that he's going to win because he was up by so much. So it was only the next morning when I still had friends from the campaign down there witnessing it that I realized what had happened.
That there was, if as you recall, Jenna Ellis. Did you ever meet Jenna Ellis, an attorney for?
I never, no, I
Good.
never met her, but I know who she is.
There was a hearing in Lansing, wasn't there?
Yeah, Rudy Giuliani brought several people to testify, several people that I know personally. At the time, it was Melissa Carone, Christina Caramo, a friend of mine, Braden Jacobazi. Uh, I believe maybe Patrick Colbeck was one of them too. So, it was a large number actually of eyewitness. Dr. Phil O'Halloran, I think, might have been one. Eyewitnesses who saw all of this, and I don't think that their concerns were taken seriously at all, because if their concerns had been taken seriously, what would have happened is they would have done a full hand recount, cross checking all of the ballots and ballot numbers, because you have a number on each ballot, with voters and the voter roll who were marked as having voted. And then you would have had to verify that all of the voter registrations for the voters who allegedly voted were accurate and correct. And it's a massive process to do that level of investigation. It would be easier if we knew that our voter rolls were accurate, but they're not, and that's a fact. And so they just, whether it was the state legislature or the state board of canvassers or the secretary of state or the Wayne County clerk, they all just decided, no, we're not going to do a hand recount. We're not going to examine the numbers on each ballot compared to the voters who allegedly cast those ballots, compared to the signatures on the absentee ballot, absentee ballot envelopes. None of that was done at all.
What a way to start a career. So how did you, at what point did you find out of Michigan fair elections?
So in 2021, I moved back to Michigan to begin investigating into the integrity of the 2020 election. And I believe I was the first to start a local county group of door to door canvassing using the voter rolls as the walk sheet to know where to go and what doors to knock on. And we carried affidavits with us, we always had a notary with us. And so when I started doing that in Macomb County, other counties throughout Michigan heard about it and asked me to train them so that they could replicate those efforts in their counties. And we did that June through the last weekend of October. So I believe we stopped before November hit because it would just get too cold. But some people continued on and some people expanded upon it. And Michigan Fair Elections Institute was one such organization that really took that template and expanded upon it into a statewide program. And I met Patrice Johnson for the first time. I believe it was at a election integrity presentation in, I want to say it was Howell, I think, in February of 2022. And then I met her again at a Detroit election integrity convention in May of 2022 with Cleta Mitchell, who is one of the guest speakers or possibly even the host. So this is where I first met all of these people, and they've carried the torch. Even when I moved to Ohio to work for Turning Point, they kept up the efforts.
That's incredible. And so when did you go on full-time staff?
I started on December 1st, and I realized that in order to expand into the most robust program we could possibly be, we needed to have a strong chapter model in each county. Instead of ad hoc task forces, if you have established chapters in each county with a chapter executive board where everybody has clearly defined roles, and underneath those roles are the different projects we want to target, we can be much more effective at the grassroots level. So I've attempted to initiate this chapter model so that we can better tackle all the myriad election issues that inevitably come up, which includes not just voter roll cleanup, but also ranked choice voting, which is a new issue that's coming up this year, and doing any kind of investigation at the local level.
You know, when I first started getting involved in this as a volunteer, I became the Nuevo lead. And so we began to try to get people from the area to, in canvassing and also data analysis. And I was paying attention to the meetings and so forth. And then had a great deal, started to have some awareness regarding township clerks, and began to recognize how that is not a simple job. And increasingly, I just discovered in the little bit that I was engaged in this process of how complex the whole matter is. And I had no clue. as to the how intrinsic the whole matter of the whole election process is, that there are so many ways in which with the election can be frauded, and that's just overwhelming to me. And so then began to recognize that as the Michigan fair elections was developing and growing, that the quality of the people, when I say quality, not just the people that were on there I consider myself a good guy, but I felt like I was really over my head in terms of the depth of preparedness and study. Like yourself, for example, you are so needed. I can really see that. Respond to what I'm saying. Do you think I'm overreacting to the complexity, or do you see what I'm talking about?
No, you're definitely correct. I think that there's so many new laws that have been implemented that have obfuscated the way that our elections operate. There's many different points of entry that can be exploited, that can cause the results to be fraudulent, inaccurate, or in need of investigation. So, I mean, just to recap some of the bad laws that have come up in the last couple of years, starting with 2018. I mean, you have same day voter registration, which doesn't leave the clerk's office enough time to determine if the new registrant really does, in fact, live in the place where they're now registering. It allows them to register to vote and immediately cast a ballot. So there's no check on whether or not this person just showed up and decided, let me quickly register and cast a vote here, as opposed to actually living in the district. So that's just one hole. Poll challengers' rights have been tied. This was passed in a ballot proposal in 2022, really making it difficult for poll challengers to actually challenge ballots that they are concerned, if are cast and counted, violate election law. And now in June, what's going to go into effect is a House bill that was passed in 2023 or 2024. It's going to go into effect this year. It would mandate that all state agencies that gather information that could be used to register to vote, they must register people to vote. So if you go to any state agency and in order to interact with them, you're required to present your name, your birth date, your driver's license, or the last four digits of your social security number, and your address. That agency must then register you to vote automatically. And then only after you've been automatically registered to vote will you be alerted that you've been registered. And the problem that we foresee with this is already we have an issue with duplicate voter registrations on the rolls. There's untold numbers of people who have two voter ID numbers. It's the same person, same first, last name, birth date, address, yet they have two different voter ID numbers. And we've been flagging this. We're concerned that with the influx of new registrations coming in from all of the state agencies, that's going to increase the number of duplicates and make it even harder to check for that. And furthermore, these state agencies do provide services to people who are not US citizens. Whether they're here illegally or legally, they just haven't gotten citizenship yet, they'll be automatically registered to vote. And when they're alerted that they've been automatically registered to vote, they have the opportunity to tell the Secretary of State that they are not a citizen and therefore can't vote. But realistically speaking, who's going to actually do that? Who's going to go out of their way to say, oh, I got registered to vote, but I'm not a citizen. I should probably tell them that I can't vote. You're expecting people to do the right thing who even inadvertently might not know that they're doing something wrong. And we had the U of M Chinese student, a Chinese national, cast a ballot in the 2024 election in Ann Arbor. And he could plead ignorance, saying he didn't know he wasn't allowed to vote, that he got registered and he used his student ID to vote. And he could plead ignorance. I didn't know I couldn't. So that's the exact same argument these people can make. So we're looking at potentially not only an increase of duplicate registrations, but an increase in the number of people who are not eligible to vote being registered to vote.
That just is one aspect, isn't it? And one of the things that I also found out about Jacky was in relationship to township clerks. We have a person that was is a supporter of ours and became a friend of ours, and would be on our staff meetings quite often, who was a township clerk. And as she was doing her clerking, I began to recognize the great responsibility of this was just a small township clerk, but the responsibilities, the oversight, the complexity that one person faced, and in a small county like hers, township like hers, the little bit of pay that she got for the huge responsibility. And we also had gone to a conference where Patrick Colback and other leading individuals, Dr. Doug Frank and others, were. This was down in Sturgis last year, early in the year. It was very educational. And what we began to recognize was that township clerks and county clerks, they're well-meaning, but once they get these positions and they're in them for a while, they trust what's going on with the Secretary of State, and you're trying to help come alongside them and try to kindly, gently be able to explain to them that these are some things that perhaps you might want to watch. um, you know what I'm talking about, don't you? And they're solidified in their knowledge, they think, but they're naive as to what can be happening. So the votes can be coming to the township, and they can have clean rolls, pass it on to the county, and they can handle it well too. But once it gets shipped off to Benson's office, things happen there. And these to try to help these township clerks and county clerks realize that they're almost impenetrable. And am I correct in this regard?
Yeah, so local clerks are tasked with keeping on file the original voter registration record. So I'll just give you an example from my experience working in the local clerk's office in my town. When somebody would register to vote, either they could come in person and register, or they could mail in their voter registration application. We would cross-reference it with state data in something called the qualified voter file or the Department of Motor Vehicles, just to verify that that information was correct, the birthday, the address, the name. But then their signature would be cut out. Okay, so you have the original signature handwritten on that form, and it would be taped or pasted to a thick cardstock index card and then filed alphabetically. So you have all of these filing cabinets. And if you're looking for a voter registration record, the original, you would go into the filing cabinet, search by last name, and pull out their card, and it's called the master card. You check the master card information, which contains not only their signature, but their full name, their birth date, their address. And that's what you hold on to when you receive their ballot, or when you receive a absentee ballot application. You verify that the information on the absentee ballot application or on the ballot matches the voter master card on file. And so if you have the Secretary of State registering people through these state agencies, it makes it almost impossible for the local clerk to get their hands on that original signature, to get that original information and store it on file. All of the files, rather than being in person that you can refer back to, are coming through one source, which is the Secretary of State, and you have to trust that the Secretary of State's information is completely accurate. And so in 2020, I noticed what would happen a lot is that we would get these absentee ballot applications coming from the Secretary of State's office to us, and there would be no MasterCard on file for that voter. So you have to blindly trust that the Secretary of State's doing its due diligence and keeping accurate records, when we know for a fact they were not. Because in 2020, and this was confirmed by the state legislature, who conducted an independent investigation and confirmed that there were several 100,000 voters who had been removed from the voter rolls over time for legitimate reasons, who had been put back on the voter rolls in 2020. So Jocelyn Benson went back at estimates up to 30 years. My guess is closer to 12, but estimates up to 30 years, and put back on everybody who had been removed. So no wonder we had so many applications coming in for voters who we had no cards on file, because those cards would have been shredded when that voter registration was removed back when it was first removed.
That's unbelievable. And so these are just some of the examples of what we're facing. And then, we also are dealing with the different lawsuits that have come down from Patrick Colback and others, 4 or 5 of them, that have gone before the Supreme Court, the state Supreme Court, and they have found Benson complicit, and yet there's no justice that comes. There's no penalty, and she just continues to go on as if all is well. That's how do you explain that one?
Well, I think there's been a lot of difficulty with the courts. There's been difficulty with the attorney general. I can speak more on GBI strategies, which was a big scandal that came out of Muskegon. It was known that there were fraudulent ballot applications returned to the clerk's office, and the ballots were issued and counted. And when it later was proven that those were fraudulent ballot applications and signatures, forgeries, Secretary of State Benson likely knew about it and may have even had a hand in them being counted and cast. But when Dana Nessel was called upon to investigate Benson, she chose not to. So you have an issue where the Democrat Attorney General is refusing to investigate the Democrat Secretary of State, even though the Secretary of State is probably part of a crime. And so the refusal of the Attorney General to do her duty to investigate a crime, it to me, and this is my opinion, I'm not a lawyer, but it seems like that's cronyism, and she's favoring the fact that Benson's probably her friend and ally, and she doesn't want to investigate her and find her guilty of anything. So she's not doing her job, and for unfair reasons. And I think that that's a violation of ethics.
Yeah, that's massive too, and it extended into other counties as well. And the difficulty in a local county, even a good county like we're living in, is to when you have like the government officials, the county officials, the township officials, a lot of times they're good people, but they're also Republicans in name only. And so to try to penetrate that just that wall of that all is well when all is not well. Can you speak into that? I mean, maybe in a sense you have, but you must have seen that. You must have seen that all over the place.
Yes, I will. Just give me one moment. My dog is going crazy, and I'm going to try to settle him down really quick. So I apologize. I'll be right back.
Wow, the election process is.
Yeah, it is. The election process is a mess. It's just so easy to cheat, unfortunately. And I had no idea that according to Michigan election law, you only need the clerk and deputy clerk present to count the votes. So ostensibly, let's say hypothetically you had a corrupt clerk who wanted to rig the election in favor of whatever candidate. He or she could go in the back room after polls close with his deputy clerk, take a look at the voter rolls for the day and see who did not show up to vote in that election, or who was sent an absentee ballot, but that absentee ballot was never returned. Log in, mark them as having returned their ballot or mark them as having voted, and then fill out a ballot and throw it through the tabulator. Like, that is very easy to do. And I suspect it happens more often than we think, because if you're able to cheat and there's no oversight and you have somebody corrupt in that position of power, they very well may do so.
Yeah, and we're only one state. You know, you just multiply this. It's incredible that Donald Trump did win this time around, um, because there was so many. There's so much propaganda and wickedness throughout the country, and yet his people showed up and turned up in massive numbers, and it must have just been so massive that they knew they weren't going to be able to get away with it this time. What would be your explanation of that?
It's certainly part of it. I also know that organizations like Michigan Fair Elections Institute recruited massive numbers of poll workers so to ensure that there was Republican and Democrat parity, especially in key areas like Detroit, whereas historically Detroit had way overrepresentation of Democrat poll workers. In 2024, Michigan Fair Elections Institute and Michigan Conservative Coalition teamed up to recruit and train and sign up Republican poll workers so that there were equal numbers. And that way, if you have equal numbers, I would suspect that it's more likely to be a check on the election process itself, because the people handling the ballots have more equal representation between the two parties, keeping a check on one party having an advantage over the other. And also, Michigan Fair Elections did warehouse watch, where they informed the clerk's office in Detroit and informed the police department in Detroit that they would have people with cameras stationed outside of the elections department, stationed outside of the place where last time in 2020 the ballot mobile came out. There was a famous video where a ballot mobile pulled out of the elections department and headed over to the TCF center in the middle of the night. We had eyes on that, and we told everybody we would. And I was told by people who watched this on election night in 2024 that there was a ballot mobile that was loaded up, but when it came time to leave the clerk's office to drive down to the TCF center, it never ended up leaving. And I think that's because they were aware they were being watched and recorded, and that there were lawyers on the hotline ready to pounce in case anything seemed to violate the law. So our vigilance, it's a testament to that. If we had not been so vigilant, they may have tried to rig it again.
That's an incredible account. Now, I just did an interview today with American Family Radio, and one of the questions that I was asked was in relationship to the election in Michigan, Mike Rogers, and how could it be that Mike Rogers lost when Trump had a very comfortable lead? And it is my view that it was a fraud, that there was fraud did come down and affect that election, and that happened in Wisconsin and elsewhere where the vote came in very, very late. You have any thoughts on that?
That's a real toss up. There's a part of me that has heard that there actually were moderate Democrats who decided to go for Trump instead of Kamala, but chose to go for Slotkin instead of Rogers. That's certainly possible. And we know that people who would be fans of RFK Jr., for example, or Tulsi Gabbard, for example, might have picked Trump over Kamala because she simply was too radical and not hitting the points that they needed to hear, like being anti war, being pro protectionist economic policy, and focused on restoring health to our citizenship, to our citizens. So it's possible that people split tickets in that large of numbers. It is strange, I admit. It is very strange, and I don't have a very good explanation.
Yeah, that is it's helpful to have your perspective on that. I also wanted to, we will eventually get into ranked choice voting, but I also wanted to just talk with you about Michigan Fair Election Institute. When did they also add the word institute to it?
That would have been the beginning of this year, I believe. We officially launched that.
Okay. And what difference is there between is that it's not just because it's high sounding, but has there been other changes in that regard?
It's my understanding that Institute is more focused on our election education pillar. So whereas we had previously been doing mostly activism, we wanted to also incorporate education into our pillars of our mission. So becoming an institute means that we're a source of election news, we're a source of election presentations, reaching out to the public to make sure they know about key issues. So just incorporating that into it.
Well, another thing I really wanted to dive into, and you're certainly a wonderful person to talk to this about, is that this organization, Michigan Fair Election, we in our informal talk beforehand, we were both saying, you were saying, and I was totally agreeing with you, how amazed you were at an organization that isn't even really all that old. It has developed such maturity and sophistication, and a team of people that are so committed. And the last that I knew, nobody was, or there was very, very few people were paid anything. That's still largely true, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we're almost entirely volunteer run, as we have been since the beginning. And as we've tried to expand and get more involved in different issues as opposed to just singularly focusing on cleaning up the voter rolls or singularly focused on recruiting poll workers. Now that we're expanding into doing more events, doing more trainings, and possibly even getting involved in ballot petition circulation, that would be through Pure Integrity Michigan Elections. That's the 501c4. I think that there's so much more work that needed to be done that they've had to expand the team and expand the mission. So that's why we're bringing more people on. But it is remarkable that we were able to get so much done with just a solid volunteer base of very passionate election patriots throughout the state.
Yeah, I know that as I stated earlier, in my engagement going to these meetings on a regular basis, I saw that there were really a solid core of good people, but I also saw that there were people that were just awesome, outstanding in terms of their knowledge of legal issues that surround the election and communication and engineering and a person like yourself as well, rising up in the discussions that you folks are all engaged in. It's needed, and God has raised up these people that are doing this massive work, and here you are trying to go out into the field and try to have chapters in every one of the counties, or as much as you possibly can. And yet when you think of the importance of the elections, if we don't have integrity in our election, our culture is done. And you know that far better than what I do, but you can just see it. And so by the grace of God, we were able to prevail over the Democrats, or whatever you want to call them. They're not really Democrats anymore. It's really socialistic, communistic globalism. And it's very frightening. And we've got a large glimpse of that today. So here it is. The Michigan Fair Election Institute is trying to expand and go deeper into the process and try to clean up every aspect that they can. And you're one of the key players in all that. You have a massive assignment. Um, doesn't it overwhelm you sometimes?
Oh, it definitely does a little bit. I guess I'm blessed because I had a pretty big job when I worked for Turning Point. I had a pretty big job when I worked for Catholics for Trump back in 2024 as the state director. So I have been graduating, I think, to bigger and bigger levels of management over volunteers and volunteer structures. So I'm grateful for my past experiences because I think it has prepared me to take on this big of a project, which is establishing chapters in all the counties. And of course, we do not have a chapter in all 83 counties in Michigan right now, but eventually we would like to, because that is going to be the most effective and efficient way to ensure the voter rolls are clean throughout the entirety of the state, and that at every local level, we have people working with the clerks to ensure that elections are free and fair.
How many counties leaders do you have so far, or chapters?
So we have between 12 and 15, and it's expanding every week. We're picking up places all over the state. So, for example, Macomb County, we just chartered a chapter there officially this week, meaning we now have the full executive board formed. And I'm working on places like St. Clair County, Lapeer, Kalamazoo, Ingham, Kent, Benzie is established, Oakland is established, Wayne is established, Monroe, Washtenaw. So we're really getting to work trying to make sure all of these key critical counties have chapters established so that they can be the boots on the ground to do that heavy lifting of the local work.
But then you have to find somebody that is a committed chapter leader, and that not only do they want to do it, they have to have real ability in organizing and leading. That is just that alone is a difficult task.
We definitely want to focus on training our leaders. If you have the willingness to do so, that's 80% of it. The remaining 20 is having the skills and knowledge. And so as an institute, we try to train our leaders so that they have all of the information and all of the resources they need to be effective leaders in their counties. So for example, I have the county leaders jump on a bi-weekly meeting where I will go through a different election integrity topic, and we'll comb through it. They can ask questions. We'll have a presentation. That way they can go into their counties. And even though they may not be total and complete experts, they will have enough knowledge that they can answer tough questions and be that voice for that issue.
Well, it's a tremendous vision, and it's obviously so desperately needed, even from the standpoint of when we talk about, the county clerks. There's so much is at stake in terms of having county clerks that understand even the politics at a higher level and have relationship with them, so that they will be doing everything that they possibly can at that level to make sure that their roles are cleaned up, and to also keep their eye on the state attorney or the state secretary of state. Um, that's that's also a big leap.
Yeah, we want to establish relationships with all of the county clerks and all of the local jurisdictional clerks in the cities and townships throughout the state. That is a pretty monumental task because that means we're going to need a person in each city, each township throughout the state, a very ambitious goal. But I do think if we keep up at the trajectory we are, we will eventually achieve that, and we'll be able to work with each and every clerk throughout the state as a helpful collaborative resource to ensure that, again, the voter rolls locally are clean, that there is parity between Democrats and Republicans staffing each election, and that the law is being followed to the letter.
In an ideal world, one that didn't have sin in it, it would be wonderful because you could just hire these people, and they would want to do right, and you wouldn't have to have all these levels of accountability. Was it John Adams that basically said that our Constitution was made for a moral people? Was it him?
If men were angels, there'd be no need for governance. I believe that was James Madison. But yes, you're right about the John Adams quote. And the founders knew that human nature tends towards sin, and that's why there needs to be checks and balances within the governmental structure. But also, there needs to be citizen oversight because we have to be those watchdogs, that last bastion, that vanguard of freedom, to ensure that our rights are protected and our elections are secure. That is our duty as American citizens.
Would you say, I mean, I sometimes say this, that we are still standing on the shoulders of our founders.
Yeah, we have inherited the most incredible governmental system that I think was ever created. And I consider myself extremely blessed that I come from America, that I was born and raised in America, that I live here, and also that my ancestors were part of the founding. I can trace my father's direct lineage, my last name, Eubanks. You can trace my dad's dad all the way back to colonists in 1638 in Virginia. My great 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 grandfathers fought in the American Revolution, fought in the Mexican American War. An ancestor of mine, John Friley Eubanks, my direct great 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 grandfather, died in Mexico City and is buried there in the U.S. Military cemetery down there. And I had a great 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 grandfather fight in the Civil War for the Union. So my grandfather dropped in on the beaches of Normandy on D-Day in the 101st Airborne and is mentioned in Band of Brothers. This is my country. My forefathers founded it and wanted to bestow the blessings of liberty upon me, their posterity. And so it's a tragedy that there are people today who would like to trample on those rights and to overturn the Constitution and to institute a more dictatorial bureaucratic state when it was not at all what was bled and died for. I feel very deeply that I am the inheritor of something great, and I owe it to the sacrifices of my ancestors to preserve what they created and built.
Are you ever on fire? Are there other people within your age realm that you identify or see as have the fire that you have?
You know, there are. They're all throughout the country. I've been really lucky to meet a number of young people who are really passionate and engaged all throughout the country.
That's marvelous. That's fantastic. But then turning our attention back to Michigan fair elections, that team there's some amazing people right there that are on those weekly meetings that are so engaged. Um, anyway, it just seems so uphill all the way, but there just seems to be no dust lying under their feet. They're just moving forward weekly as a team. And I just want to, in our broadcast here, I just, I'm not paid to say positive words about this organization, but I just think it must be one of the very top flight organizations for election integrity in the whole nation. And I think that's true. Hasn't it been kind of acknowledged as such?
We're definitely paving the way and we're setting the standard and we're a leading model. I know that we have gotten involved in some lawsuits that have been put before the Supreme Court. They've been submitted to the Supreme Court. So we'll see if that moves forward. And if it does, I think that would really set us apart as the premier election integrity organization in the country. And I give all, credit to resources like the Election Integrity Network that have provided us with working groups and PowerPoint presentations and videos, lots and lots of helpful resources to get this off the ground in our state.
And tell about who the leader of that organization is briefly.
That would be Cleta Mitchell.
Yeah.
She's an attorney and specializing in constitution and election law. And she's been a phenomenal advocate. And she really knows all of the problems throughout our election system that can and have been exploited. And she's been a really fearless advocate for positive change that will safeguard our right to vote.
I know she is an awesome warrior herself and has been engaged in this for a long time. Was one of the things that we are certainly looking at right now and realize is that the left never rests. They're always about trying to find new ways to throw a monkey wrench in the whole process, and they're very wicked and they're very skillful. And I think one of the things that I really wanted to talk about as we move towards closing is the what do we call the it's called the you can rank choice voting. And as a matter of fact, I heard about this just in the today or yesterday, that right here in our own community in Fremont, that there's going to be a so-called teaching opportunity to propagandize the people of Nuevo County and beyond on rank choice voting. It's actually a Saturday, April 26th between 1 and 3:30 at the district library, which is right across from our office, American Decency Association. But tell about that rank. I'm not asking you to go deep on it, but just give kind of a sense of what that entails, if you would, please.
To cover ranked choice voting, just some key points to know. The way it works is all of the candidates for a particular office are meant to be voted for. So right now, the way it is you select one candidate out of the list of candidates for a given office. With ranked choice voting, you're encouraged to vote for all of the candidates, but just in your order of preference. So you would rank your first choice candidate in the first choice spot, your second choice candidate in the second choice spot on the ballot, so on and so forth. And there I've seen ballots for city council races, like in Portland, Maine, and the city of New York, where there's a dozen or more candidates for a single office. So you're asking the voter to rank a dozen or more candidates in order of preference. And I think it's unrealistic to expect that voters could possibly know everything about all of the candidates in a given race to have sufficient information to be able to rank them properly according to their true preference. But even more on the counting side of things. So the tabulators that do the vote counting are supposed to be tabulated to recalculate the ballot vote tallies through rounds of elimination. So whoever gets the least amount of first choice votes, if no candidate gets over 50% first choice votes, you go to the bottom candidate who got the least number of first choice votes. You eliminate that candidate. And then you have to go back to the ballots that ranked that candidate that was eliminated and see who their second choice candidate was, and then take their second choice and add votes to the second choice candidate in the second round of voting, which will produce a different result. And then still, if nobody has reached more than 50% of first choice votes. Then you eliminate the next bottom candidate, go back to the people who had that either as their first choice or reallocated to their second choice, and go to their ballots and see what their third choice was or their second choice was and reallocate those votes. And in real life instances, like in the New York City Council race, it can take up to 10 rounds of retallying the votes and eliminating the bottom tier candidates to determine a winner. And oftentimes, somebody who did not get the most first choice votes will overtake the person who did and be declared the winner. So losers actually end up becoming the winners of these races.
That's bewildering. Now tell me this, how many times do you have to go back around and vote again? I mean, you're there to vote, and then you can't be standing around there waiting to see what the results are going to be. Explain that. How does that work?
They're counting on voters to cast one ballot, and then the machine does all of the calculating. So you have to
Oh my
be
goodness.
totally trusting that the tabulator has been calibrated correctly to recount all of these
I get it.
votes through every single round. And it's almost impossible to do a hand audit, because what you would have to do is you'd have to go into the ballot box and look at all of the rankings on every ballot, and you'd basically have to use a tally system on a whiteboard to figure out who really won, and scratch off this candidate and move the tally mark to that candidate, go back, shuffle through the ballot stack, find who voted first choice for the candidate that was eliminated, and check their second choice and go put that second choice tally on the board. I
Hmm.
mean, it's almost impossible.
Why do the Democrats, the Democrats are more likely to be the ones that favor this? Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, all of the organizations I'm aware of that are pushing for ranked choice voting are largely funded by left wing operatives and left wing nonprofit groups like George Soros, for example. And the issue is that they want to paint it as it's kind, it's nice, everybody gets to pick, and it's nobody getting their candidate beat. Like, your candidate doesn't get beat because you voted for all of the candidates. Even if it was your last choice could still win. So technically, you still had your vote cast and counted. You still had your voice heard. So it's just their slogan is making voting kind again, which is a very strange slogan to have, in my opinion.
So they're going around the state of Michigan right now, I understand, and they have quite a plan of action for this year. And when I say they, who is it that's behind this particularly? What is their name, and what is their strategy going forward for this year?
So the organization is called Rank My Vote, Rank MI Vote, and their website is rankmyvote.org. They are trying to get their ballot proposal language confirmed by the State Board of Canvassers, and then they're going to begin circulating ballot proposal petitions. Memorial weekend, I believe, is their launch weekend, and they're trying to have volunteers at as many rest stops throughout the state as possible on the holiday weekend to catch the commuters traveling across the state. So they are ready for a full rollout. Now they have to gather 600,000 signatures for this proposal to get on the ballot, but then it would, if they succeed, it would become a constitutional amendment. And we already have concerns about how many ballot proposals have been passed through this model, and I would be concerned that if they get the 600,000 signatures, it's more likely than not that it would pass in a state referendum.
And I think maybe one of the reasons why you say that if they get it on the ballot, that they will do such a high-powered job of pouring money into the camp to make it look like this is the way this makes sense, and it would be popularized. Is that why you were saying you would be concerned about that?
Yeah, and also we already have so many issues with our elections in Michigan to begin with that I would be concerned that those election issues would be exploited to favor this outcome of having that ballot proposal pass. I mean, we got Proposal 2 and Proposal 3 in 2022, which ushered in some of the most liberal, progressive, I think regressive pro-abortion laws in the country. And I think that given the track record of ballot proposals that are left-wing tending to pass, I think it would be more likely than not that it could.
So with this meeting that's taking place at the Fremont District Library on April 26th, again, the Saturday, 1 until 3:30, there'll be a presentation there and handouts probably to a pretty significant degree. Well done, well put together. The presenter will probably be really, really sharp in terms of making their case. And what would you recommend for like-minded people like myself, not just to show up, but to show up in fact, but what would be the purpose of showing up?
So, first and foremost, we want people to ask hard questions that stump the presenters. We are in the process of developing a list of key questions to ask at the meeting so that the public who's attending to be informed about it will be faced and confronted with the questions they can't answer about the process. We also think it's important to listen to what they have to say about their strategy. They may be giving intel about where they plan to go and what they plan to do to be successful in their efforts. And it's critical that we stay abreast of this. We need to know what they plan to do, where they plan to go, and when they plan to do it so that we can hedge them off.
Yeah, that certainly does make sense. And so have you been to any of these meetings yourself, Jacky?
I have not, but there was a recording of a League of Women Voters ranked choice voting meeting in Howell, Michigan. And we did have some volunteers from MFEI go and attend and ask questions and take notes. And what I got out of listening to the recording is that their focus is so much on this is a kind way of voting. This is the nice way of voting. It eliminates the meanness of politics when they don't really focus on the practicalities of how complicated it is. And they don't really seem to have answers when you confront them with the fact that it would be impossible to audit the vote in case of a need of a recount.
So when you try to establish a new chapter in a county like, say, like Newaygo, how do you go about trying to set up something? Let's say you were trying to do that in Newaygo. What would you be trying to do, and how would you do it?
So I would first call through the list of volunteers that we already have on file who live in Newaygo County, seeing if any of them would be interested in taking on one of a number of leadership roles based on the different projects we're trying to tackle. And in the event that we don't have a list of volunteers in that county, there are counties we don't have anybody, Newaygo is not one, but there are counties where we don't have any volunteers. In that event, I think it would be beneficial to go to community events in the county and see if recruitment efforts can be made through things like tabling or calling local grassroots groups and organizations and offering to do a presentation about things like the dangers of ranked choice voting, and then at the meeting calling for volunteers.
Yeah, that's very helpful. I just I can't stress it strongly enough just how impressed I am with the organization, and that they have people like you, Jacky. You are really an inspiration, and I really appreciated interviewing you, and have gotten a lot of new information and deepening information just with the time we've had. In the time that we have remaining, what else would you like to tell us or let us know, or encourage us by?
Well, we have a saying at MFEI that not everybody can do everything, but everybody can do a little thing, one small thing. Everybody can do a small thing. And so there's so many different ways to get involved in MFEI's election integrity efforts. If you only have 2 hours a week, you can still go on the Check My Vote website and look through the data on the voter rolls and see if there's anything that needs to be flagged for in-person investigation. If you have a couple of hours once a week or once every other week to go out on a Saturday to knock on a door, you can go do that. If you have time once a month to submit affidavits to your local clerk, we have opportunities for that. It's not meant to be one person doing everything. It's meant to be many people doing small things together to cause a big impact.
Yeah, I think that's well said, and I think just the MFEI Thursday meetings. That's another thing that is a real positive, because there's truly is connection and fellowship and energy on those weekly meetings. Speak to that just a bit too, if you would.
Every Thursday, we have something called News at Noon. It is a WebEx meeting that people can sign up to attend, and we go through different presenters to speak on different election integrity topics. And we just want to make sure that anybody who's interested in these issues has the opportunity to hear an expert speaking about these various topics so that they can go out and be informed, educated voters and advocates for integrity in our elections. So anybody is welcome to attend. You just have to register. I believe the registration link is at pureintegritymichiganelections.org.
Well, just about the time when I figured that we'll be wrapping things up, another thought comes to my mind. And so here's another thing that I'm going to toss at you. And that is, as we think about the upcoming election in 2026 for governor and I would believe Secretary of State and Attorney General, um, all those are up for grabs, aren't they, in just a couple of years or next year, actually?
I believe it's going to be the most offices open and on the ballot in decades, if not all of Michigan history, because we have so many openings. So there's going to be so many different seats that people are running for. It's going to be a very, very, very big election.
And do you have any sense of what the chances are that with the results of this past year, would you say that the folks at Michigan Fair Election Institute are optimistic, or knowing them they probably are, but what would you say?
I know the work's not done. We still have a large number of voter registrations that likely should not be on the voter rolls. Again, as I've stressed, people who've moved out of state, people who are deceased, we need those removed from the voter rolls. We need clean voter rolls. And that's an ongoing project that seemingly never ends, at least not as long as Jocelyn Benson's in office. So we have to keep up the fight of keeping the voter rolls clean in order to ensure that the elections in 2026 are fair. And then, of course, we have this rollout with the duplicate voter registrations that might come through the state agencies. So our work is cut out for us, and the work is not done. But we're staying vigilant and we're keeping up the fight.
You certainly are. And what kind of contact information would you make available for anybody that wanted to talk with you or email you or text you or have connection with you?
I would recommend that they send me an email. It's pretty simple and straightforward. It's just Jacky. So my first name is spelled JACKY at mifairelections.org. So again, it's my first name, Jacky, at mifairelections.org.
I really want to thank you for your great interview and the time you gave to us and all your information and passion is electric. And I have every confidence that with God is on your side, and He will continue to keep you energized. And I believe you'll continue to look to Him. And I look forward to continuing to have updates from you one way or another. And so, Jacky, God bless you, and thank you so much for doing all that you're doing.